Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some truly fascinating research on why traditional employee retention methods are just completely failing in the hospitality sector, and, more importantly, exactly how we can fix it. Look, if you're trying to hire right now, you already know the global hospitality sector is facing a massive labor shortage. It's tough out there. But what you might not realize is that the traditional playbook for keeping your absolute best people, it's totally obsolete. So let's dive right into this massive crisis by asking the one question every single hospitality executive needs to answer right now. Why on earth is the industry losing all its youngest talent? We're seeing astonishingly high turnover rates, and frankly, despite throwing higher wages or standard perks at the problem, the bleeding just hasn't stopped. It turns out we've been diagnosing the illness entirely wrong.
We really need to shatter this myth that competitive pay alone is going to keep young talent around. Traditional motivation, basic compensation, standard benefits, the usual corporate ladders, it's just no longer enough to buy loyalty. Instead, it's all about the holistic brand experience. The total experience an employee has with your brand, from the very second they read a job posting to their daily interactions on the floor, has become the absolute ultimate driver of whether they stay or whether they pack up and go.
And researchers didn't just guess on this. They looked at the hard data. They isolated exactly 60,000 comments made by millennials and Gen Z from a massive data set to definitively track shifting workplace sentiment. Using some really cutting-edge AI-powered text analysis, they were able to extract the true feelings and priorities of these younger workers. This completely cuts through the noise of those standard, frankly biased employee surveys we're all so used to. Here's our roadmap for retaining the future workforce through 2040. We're going to quickly hit the war for hospitality talent, meet Gen Y and Z, the brand experience loyalty driver, ESG and DEI non-negotiables, career mobility and training, and finally, future-proofing the workplace. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The war for hospitality talent. Right now, we're in a struggle that's largely defined by some astonishingly low levels of brand commitment across the global sector. To figure out why, researchers ran a sentiment analysis of over 54,000 specific job reviews across 355 unique companies. We're talking 41,502 reviews from Glassdoor and over 13,000 from Indeed. By analyzing these raw, unfiltered conversations that employees are actively having about their employers online, we get a super accurate picture of what's actually driving talent away and, crucially, what's drawing them in.
Section 2. Meet Gen Y and Z.
For years, corporate strategies have just lumped these two cohorts together into one giant young people category. And honestly, that is a massive mistake. Just look at the stark contrast here. Gen Y, or millennials, tend to look for personal meaning. They prefer coaching over strict instruction, and they actually use the brands they work for to construct their own personal identity. But Gen Z? They grew up during global economic recessions and the rise of total digital transparency. They are highly pragmatic. They demand fast career progression, absolute financial security, and direct, open communication. Gen Z enters the labor market with pretty much zero baseline brand loyalty. They don't just trust you because you have a famous logo on the door, you have to prove your worth to them every single day.
Section 3. The brand experience loyalty driver.
So the real trick is how organizations bridge these generational gaps. And that brings us to the ultimate driver of loyalty, employer brand experience. This is how you take a pragmatic Gen Z worker with zero initial loyalty and transform them into a fiercely committed, long-term brand ambassador. You see, employer branding isn't just external marketing to customers anymore. It's the deliberate construction of an identity that proves to employees that your workplace genuinely matches their values. It's about aligning your outbound communication with the actual inbound perceived value. If you promise a super collaborative, innovative environment in your job ads, but the day-to-day reality on the hotel floor is rigid and stressful, that disconnect destroys loyalty in a heartbeat. The experience absolutely has to match the promise.
The data actually breaks this experience down into 4 really digestible dimensions that dictate how an employee senses and acts upon your brand. First is sensory, literally seeing your ads or hearing coworkers tell stories. Then there's affective, which is the emotional connection, that actual feeling of delight when they interact with your brand. Intellectual is triggered by problem solving or reading up on your brand's core mission online. And finally, behavioral involves physical actions, like actively clicking through to visit your career pages. To build real, lasting loyalty, you have to ask yourself, is your organization actively managing all 4 of these dimensions at the exact same time?
Section 4. ESG and DEI non-negotiables.
For these younger workers, environmental, social, and governance issues, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion, well, they aren't just nice-to-have HR buzzwords anymore. They are absolute non-negotiables. These policies are core indicators of whether an organization is trustworthy and actually worth their time. Notice the checklist we have here. We're talking about concrete corporate social responsibility, actual waste and water management, clear stances on climate justice, and visible ethnic and gender diversity across leadership. Whether it's making strict emissions reduction pledges in Thailand or fostering an actively inclusive workplace culture, Gen Z demands that employers transparently live these values every single day. If your brand messaging proves you care about ESG and DEI, you instantly become a magnet for this talent.
And just look at this key takeaway directly from the analysis. The research literally proves that exclusion actively drives talent migration to competing sectors. It's costing hospitality brands their absolute best people. Think about it. If an employee feels excluded, they don't just quit your hotel, they often quit the entire hospitality sector altogether. On the flip side, genuine inclusion is this incredibly powerful anchor. It deepens their psychological attachment to your brand, ensuring they feel connected and stick around way longer.
Section 5. Career mobility and training.
Now, it's one thing to talk about high-level brand values like growth and equity, right? But it's another thing entirely to build the actual infrastructure that delivers it to a 22-year-old new hire. Using the Grand Hyatt Hong Kong as a prime example, we can see a super clear three-step path. Step 1 is establishing dedicated training academies. Step 2, using those academies to ensure transparent, unmistakable paths for promotion. Because when Gen Z can clearly see their future mapped out, it satisfies that deep demand for fast career advancement and occupational security. And that leads directly to Step 3, deep, lasting employee loyalty. Structured training builds loyalty far, far more effectively than just throwing financial rewards at the problem.
Section 6. Future-proofing the workplace.
Okay, let's take everything we've just learned about brand experience, ESG, and career mobility and project it forward on this timeline. This shows exactly where the hospitality labor market is heading over the next 2 decades. Notice how, while Gen Y sentiment has held fairly steady since 2008, Gen Z's sentiment is actively dropping right now. It is projected to hit crisis levels by 2030 if companies don't completely overhaul their employer brand. And by 2040, the entire labor force is going to be dominated by these younger cohorts. If your employer branding strategy relies on the old, traditional methods, you literally won't have a workforce left to operate your business.
So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If paychecks no longer buy loyalty, is your organization's brand experience genuinely strong enough to survive the workforce of 2040? We've seen today that the future of hospitality doesn't belong to the companies that just hand out the biggest paychecks. It belongs to the companies that deliberately craft an authentic, inclusive, and totally transparent employer brand experience. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how you build your brand from the inside out.